Ethan Reynolds knew something was wrong the moment his laptop screen froze. He was in the middle of an important Zoom meeting with his boss, pitching a major project, when everything went dead. His internet, his smart home system, even his security cameras. The little "no" internet connection symbol blinked mockingly at him. With a frustrated sigh, he grabbed his phone. No Wi-Fi. He switched to mobile data and Googled his internet provider. No outages reported. Great, he muttered. Ethan lived in Westwood Estates, an upscale suburban neighborhood just outside Austin, Texas. The kind of place where houses were uniform, lawns were required to be green, and the HOA, Homeowners Association, ruled with an iron fist. He had moved in 6 months ago thinking it was the perfect community, safe, clean, and quiet. But he quickly learned that Westwood Estates wasn't just strict, it was suffocating. A few weeks after moving in, he had received his first HOA violation notice for leaving his trash cans out past 9 a.m. The second was for installing an unapproved mailbox. The third, his grass was half an inch too long. Each violation came with a fine. But this, cutting his internet, that was a whole new level. Ethan marched outside, hoping to spot a Spectrum or AT&T repair truck. Instead, he saw his neighbors standing on their porches, looking just as confused. "Hey, your internet out too?" he called to his next-door neighbor, Mrs. Thompson. She nodded. "Mine's been out since 8 a.m., called customer service. Said there's no issue on their end." A sinking feeling formed in Ethan's stomach. He scanned the street. More people were coming out now, checking phones, talking in hushed voices. No one had service. Then he spotted them. At the end of the cul-de-sac, 3 men in navy blue uniforms stood in front of a white van. They weren't utility workers. Their uniforms had a logo, a golden house symbol with Westwood HOA written underneath. The Homeowners Association. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. What the hell were they doing? His eyes landed on Mr. Grayson, the HOA president, a stiff, polished man in his late 50s, always seen in a pressed suit and sunglasses. He was speaking to the men, giving orders. Ethan walked toward them, ignoring the uneasy glances from his neighbors. "Hey," he called. "What's going on?" Mr. Grayson turned, his expression calm, almost amused. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds. How can I help you?" Ethan gestured towards the van. "Our internet's out, everyone's, and your guys are standing around like they know something about it." Mr. Grayson smiled, that infuriating politician-like smile. "Ah, yes, the HOA board made a decision last week. We've temporarily suspended all independent internet services in the neighborhood." Ethan blinked. "You... what?" "Westwood Estates is rolling out a new community-wide HOA internet service to ensure a more regulated, secure, and uniform experience for all residents," Mr. Grayson continued. "We've discontinued third-party providers to prevent network congestion and security risks." Ethan stared at him, trying to process the words. "You shut down our internet without telling us. You were notified." "No, we weren't." Mr. Grayson's smile didn't falter. "An email was sent last month. Perhaps you missed it." Ethan clenched his fists. "You can't just cut people off like this. I work from home. I need my internet." "Don't worry, Mr. Reynolds. Our new HOA internet service will be up and running within the next few days. And until then, patience is a virtue." Ethan wanted to punch that smug smile off his face. "This is insane." Mr. Grayson tilted his head slightly. "You signed the HOA agreement when you moved in, Mr. Reynolds. Page 47, Section 9. See, Westwood Estates reserves the right to implement community-wide technological improvements at its discretion. Ethan had never read the whole document. Who actually does? You're saying we don't have a choice? Mr. Grayson sighed. Of course you have a choice. You can always move. Ethan's blood boiled. He wasn't rich like most of his neighbors. Selling wasn't an option. And even if it were, who would buy a house in a neighborhood where the HOA controlled the internet? He turned back toward his house, fuming. Other residents had overheard the conversation, their faces etched with worry and frustration. Whispers filled the air. This wasn't right. Back inside, Ethan grabbed his phone again. No Wi-Fi, no data, no signal. His computer, useless. His smart home system, offline. A horrifying thought struck him. If the HOA controlled the internet, what else could they control? Just then, a notification popped up on his screen. Westwood, HOA, welcome to the new digital era. Your HOA-managed internet service will be available soon. Until then, please enjoy a technology detox. Remember, Westwood Estates thrives on community and real-world interaction. Ethan's heart pounded. This wasn't just an outage, it was a takeover. Ethan paced across his living room, his hands clenching into fists. He had always thought HOAs were annoying, sending petty fines for mailbox colors and grass height. But this was something out of a dystopian nightmare. He glanced at his phone. Still no signal. Laptops? Useless. His entire house, once an ultra-modern smart home, had been reduced to a dead shell. His frustration boiled over. They can't do this. They can't just cut off the entire neighborhood's internet and expect people to sit quietly, or could they? From his window, he could see his neighbors still standing in confused clusters on their porches, whispering amongst themselves. Some were trying to use their phones, others were just staring at the HOA van, as if expecting an answer. Ethan wasn't going to wait for an answer. He grabbed his keys and headed outside, crossing the street to his friend and neighbor, Jake Carter. Jake was an ex-military guy, built like a tank, and had a reputation for not taking HOA nonsense lightly. "Hey," Ethan called. "Any luck getting online?" Jake shook his head. "Nope, tried everything. Even hooked up a portable router. Dead. Whatever they did, it's not just cutting off internet service, they're blocking all signals." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Blocking. Jake nodded grimly. "You ever hear of signal jammers? Military-grade tech that can scramble Wi-Fi, cell networks, even emergency frequencies. I've used them before, overseas, and trust me, this feels like one." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Why the hell would the HOA need that?" Jake smirked. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?" The two men exchanged a look. Then Jake lowered his voice. "We need to find out what's in that van." Breaking the rules. The HOA van had been parked at the cul-de-sac all morning, not moving. The three uniformed men in navy blue had disappeared, probably inside one of the HOA offices. Ethan and Jake moved toward the van, careful not to attract attention. Jake reached for the back door handle. Locked. "Figures," Jake muttered. Then he tapped Ethan's shoulder and pointed toward a small ventilation slot near the side of the van. "Give me a boost." Ethan hesitated. "If they catch us..." Jake shot him a grin. "What? They gonna cut our water next?" Ethan rolled his eyes and hoisted Jake up. He pressed his face against the vent and peered inside. What he saw made his blood turn ice cold. Inside the van, glowing red servers hummed in the dark. Wires connected them to a satellite dish mounted on the roof. Screens displayed real-time data streams, lists of names, addresses, active devices. Holy shit, Jake whispered. He jumped down, his face pale. They're not just controlling the internet, he said, voice urgent. They're tracking everything. Every device, every IP address, every person. Ethan's throat tightened. Why would an HOA need that kind of surveillance? Jake looked around, lowering his voice further. This ain't about network congestion. They're watching us. A sudden warning. Before Ethan could respond, a sharp ping sounded from his smartwatch. He looked down. New HOA notice. Unauthorized activity detected. Residents are reminded to follow all HOA rules and regulations. Non-compliance may result in penalties. A second later, Jake's phone, which had been on airplane mode, lit up with the same message. They hadn't even used the internet. Yet the HOA knew exactly what they were doing. Ethan looked around, his skin crawling. Were there cameras watching them right now? Hidden microphones, motion sensors. A door creaked open nearby. Mr. Grayson stepped out of his house, hands folded behind his back. Even from across the street, his calm, knowing smile made Ethan's blood boil. Jake nudged Ethan. They saw us. We need to talk to someone outside, Ethan whispered. A lawyer, a reporter, hell, even the police. Jake nodded. Agreed, but first, we gotta get out of this damn neighborhood. Escape attempt. They headed for Jake's truck. His house was on the edge of Westwood Estates, close to the main gate. If they could just drive out, they could get to a coffee shop or a library. Somewhere with internet. Jake climbed into the driver's seat, Ethan in the passenger seat. The engine roared to life. Jake put the truck in drive and hit the gas. And that's when every light in the neighborhood turned red. The gates have closed. The security gates at the front of the community slammed shut. Street lights flickered. Motion sensors activated. A robotic voice echoed through hidden speakers. Attention residents. Due to ongoing community enhancements, all exits are temporarily closed. Thank you for your cooperation. Ethan's blood ran cold. They weren't just being watched, they were being trapped. Jake's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Tell me this isn't happening. Ethan swallowed hard. They're locking us in. Jake's jaw clenched. He floored the gas, racing toward the exit. The truck skidded to a stop just inches from the massive steel gate that had slammed down across the road. A single security camera pivoted toward them. Click. A new notification appeared on Ethan's watch. A warning. Unauthorized exit attempt detected. Jake slammed his fist against the dashboard. This is a goddamn prison. Ethan's heart pounded. They couldn't call for help. They couldn't get online. And now they couldn't even leave. And the worst part, they still didn't know why. The security camera was still watching them. Ethan could feel it. The unblinking mechanical stare drilling into his skull. The same way Mr. Grayson had stared at him earlier, calm and smug, like a man who knew he was in control. Jake hit the gas again, slamming the truck against the massive steel gate. Boom! The entire truck shuddered, but the gate didn't budge. Damn it! Jake growled, gripping the wheel. This thing is reinforced. There's no way we're busting through. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead. Then we find another way. Jake exhaled sharply, gripping the seal for a moment before nodding. All right, we go on foot. There's got to be an emergency exit, a maintenance gate, something. Ethan glanced back at the street. The houses stood eerily still, their neatly trimmed hedges and manicured lawns too perfect, too quiet. Then he noticed something strange. A few neighbors were still outside, but none of them were moving. Mrs. Thompson, the old lady next door, the young couple who had just moved in, even the teenage kid who was always skateboarding down the street. They were standing perfectly still, like statues, and they were all looking directly at Ethan and Jake. Jake followed his gaze, and his face twisted in alarm. "What the hell?" "Something's wrong," Ethan whispered. Then, as if on cue, every porch light in the neighborhood flickered at the exact same time. And the residents, every single one of them, turned and started walking back inside, like they had received a silent order. Ethan's skin crawled. "This place is not normal," Jake muttered. "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "And I don't think we're the first ones to notice." The forgotten house. There was only one house in Westwood Estates that no one ever talked about. It sat at the very edge of the neighborhood, partially hidden behind overgrown bushes, a direct violation of the HOA's landscaping rules. Unlike the other perfect pastel-colored homes, this one looked abandoned. Faded paint, broken shutters, no car in the driveway, but the strangest part, no one ever saw the owner. Ethan had noticed the house before, but never thought much of it until now. Why would the HOA, which sent fines for the tiniest violations, allow this place to stay untouched? "I bet whoever lived there didn't play by the HOA's rules," Ethan said. Jake cracked his knuckles. "Then let's find out what happened to them." They moved quickly, keeping low as they made their way toward the forgotten house. As soon as they stepped onto the porch, a foul stench hit them. Rotting wood, mildew, and something else. Something metallic. Jake tried the doorknob. Unlocked. "Convenient," he muttered. They pushed the door open. The files inside. The house was a mess. Dust-covered furniture, stacks of unopened mail, a half-eaten meal on the dining table, like someone had left in a hurry and never returned. Or never got the chance to leave. Ethan moved toward a desk in the corner, papers scattered everywhere. He picked one up. It was a printed email addressed to someone named Daniel Whittaker. Subject: HOA Internet Project. Urgent. "Danielle, I found something disturbing in the HOA's network infrastructure plans. This isn't about congestion. They're implementing a control system. Data tracking, signal jamming, behavior monitoring. This isn't just an internet service. It's a surveillance grid. We need to go to the media. If I don't make it out, you know what to do. Ryan." Ethan's heartbeat quickened. "Jake, look at this." Jake scanned the paper, his face darkening. "Surveillance grid. That explains why they're tracking devices. But why?" Ethan shuffled through more documents. Some were blueprints, showing underground cables, nodes, and servers beneath Westwood Estates. But then he found the file that made his blood run cold. A Westwood HOA resident compliance report. Inside were names, addresses, behavior scores. "What the hell is this?" Ethan muttered. Next to each resident's name was a rating. Some were labeled compliant. Others had a yellow tag that read watch list. Then there was a third category, eliminated. His stomach twisted as he scanned the names. Some had been crossed out in red ink. And then he saw it. Daniel Whittaker, eliminated. Jake swore under his breath. Whoever this guy was, he found out too much. Ethan's hands were shaking. This isn't just about HOA rules. This is about control. They're ranking residents based on compliance, and when someone doesn't play along, they make them disappear. Jake finished grimly. The pieces were coming together. The HOA didn't just cut their internet. They had shut down outside communication entirely. The security gates weren't just for safety. They were meant to trap people inside. And the surveillance grid? It wasn't just watching. It was deciding who got to stay and who didn't. Then, from the hallway, a floorboard creaked. Ethan and Jake froze. Someone was inside the house with them. The chase. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. He grabbed Jake's arm, motioning toward the back door. Another creak. Then a shadow moved past the hallway entrance. They ran. Jake kicked open the back door, and they bolted into the backyard. Heavy footsteps followed them. "Go, go!" Jake hissed. They reached the edge of the property, vaulting over a fence just as the back door slammed open behind them. Ethan dared a glance back. 2 men in HOA uniforms were standing in the doorway, and one of them was holding a tranquilizer gun. A dart whizzed past Ethan's head, embedding itself in a tree trunk. Jake grabbed Ethan's wrist, yanking him forward. "We're not getting caught. Not now." They tore through the neighbor's yard, staying low, staying fast. If the HOA wanted to silence them, they'd have to work for it. But Ethan knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about HOA rules anymore. This was war. The night air was thick with tension as Ethan and Jake ran for their lives. Behind them, the HOA enforcers weren't just chasing them anymore. They were hunting. The men in uniform moved with military precision, sweeping on the streets, cutting off escape routes, silent and efficient. This wasn't just an overzealous homeowners association. This was organized. And that meant someone powerful was pulling the strings. Ethan and Jake ducked into the shadows behind a row of hedges, breathing hard. Jake wiped sweat from his face. "They're serious about this." Ethan swallowed hard. "We need to get this out. The world needs to know." Jake nodded. "Then we need to get to my house. I've got an old ham radio in my garage. If the internet's down and signals are jammed, that's our only shot at broadcasting outside." Ethan glanced toward the roving patrols moving through the streets. "We won't make it walking. We need a distraction." Jake smirked. "I think I have an idea." Lighting the fuse. 10 minutes later, the HOA's main van sat in the cul-de-sac, its sinister, red-lit servers humming inside. Jake crept toward it, gripping the homemade Molotov cocktail he had just crafted from an old whiskey bottle. "HOA wants to play dirty." He struck a match. "Let's see how they like it." He tossed the bottle. Whoosh! The fire exploded across the hood of the van, flames licking at the windshield. Alarms blared. The HOA guards whipped around at the sound, momentarily abandoning their patrols to rush toward the burning vehicle. Ethan and Jake didn't wait. They ran. Breaking the signal block. Jake's garage was exactly what Ethan expected. A prepper's paradise. Old military gear, survival supplies, and, most importantly, a massive ham radio setup. Jake powered it up, twisting dials and flipping switches. The ancient machine crackled to life. Ethan grabbed the mic. "This is Ethan Grayson broadcasting from Westwood Estates. We are being held against our will. The HOA has set up a surveillance grid. They are static." A new voice cut in, cold and robotic. "Unauthorized transmission detected. Compliance required." Then the lights went out. A metallic thunk sounded from outside. Jake grabbed his pistol, eyes narrowing. "They're here. The final stand." The front door slammed open. A team of HOA enforcers stormed inside, no longer hiding behind polite rules and petty fines. They moved tactically, silencers on their weapons, eyes scanning the room. Jake fired first. A shot rang out, hitting the first enforcer in the leg. The man collapsed with a grunt. The others ducked for cover. Ethan yanked a wrench from the workbench and swung hard at the nearest enforcer, knocking him backward. They fought. Like hell. Fists, bullets, sheer desperation. Then, in the chaos, Ethan saw him. "Mr. Grayson, standing in the doorway, hands clasped behind his back, watching calmly. "You've caused quite a mess, Mr. Grayson," he said, voice cold. "You should have just followed the rules." Ethan, breathing hard, wiped blood from his lip. "Screw your rules," Mr. Grayson sighed. "A shame. You had potential." Then he gave a simple nod. One of the enforcers raised a gun. The unexpected savior. Boom! The enforcer jerked backward, a sniper shot hitting him square in the chest. Mr. Grayson's eyes widened. "What?" Another shot rang out, then another. Outside, sirens wailed. Flashing blue and red lights filled the street as multiple FBI SUVs screeched to a halt. Jake grinned. "Guess our little broadcast got through, after all." FBI agents stormed the house. The remaining enforcers dropped their weapons, realizing it was over. Mr. Grayson simply sighed, holding up his hands. "Gentlemen, I believe there's been a misunderstanding." The lead FBI agent ignored him, stepping past to look at Ethan. "Mr. Grayson?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah?" The agent motioned to the neighborhood. "You want to tell me what the hell's going on here?" Ethan exhaled, relieved but still shaken. "Oh, you have no idea." The fallout. By morning, Westwood Estates was in chaos. The FBI raided the HOA headquarters. Inside, they found dossiers on every resident, secret surveillance systems, and evidence of people who had disappeared. Mr. Grayson and several HOA board members were arrested. The FBI later confirmed that the entire operation was part of a secret experiment in behavioral control. The HOA's internet control system, completely illegal. The tech had been developed for military psyops, but somehow it had ended up in a suburban neighborhood. Jake and Ethan sat on the curb, watching the chaos unfold. Jake grinned. "Well, that was fun." Ethan laughed, a real exhausted laugh. "Remind me never to buy a house in an HOA neighborhood again." Jake nodded. "Damn right." As the last of the HOA enforcers were led away in cuffs, Ethan looked up at the sky. For the first time in days, his phone buzzed. A notification popped up. Wi-Fi connected.